Cheers to a heavy metal weekend, everyone. Louisiana here on Hero, and before I get started, I wanted to say my heart goes out to the wonderful people of Indonesia who this video is about. And they were recently hit by a tsunami. It caused a lot of death and destruction. And if I would ask my viewers if you could consider donating to the relief effort. I usually use UNICEF because it's a children's charity, but use whatever charity you like. UNICEF link is in the description. Now, when you think of the country Indonesia, what usually comes to mind? Is it the awesome action movie The Raid, which is really good? Do you think about the Komodo dragon, which is from there, you know, the big lizard thing? Well, honestly, what you should be thinking about is death metal. Like, you wouldn't believe the quantity and quality of the death metal music that comes out of Indonesia. It's unreal. And what I really love about Indonesian death metal is it's not quite the super technical craziness or the deathcore stuff you get in the US. It's more primordial. It's more almost death metal roots, if you will. It's almost as if some death metal gods handed the young musicians of Indonesia and metal fans of Indonesia these early death metal records and said, "Here, take this, the glorious real death metal by which you will build your church." And they said, "We will. I promise we will. And we will not deviate too far." And they haven't. And it's funny, my inspiration for this video, other than the main album, which we're going to cover today, is I was watching a YouTube video by a YouTuber named Ola England, who's also the lead guitarist of The Haunted, which I think I bring up every video because The Haunted is my favorite band. But in his video, he was in Indonesia, and he also runs a guitar company, and so he was visiting the manufacturing plant, whatever. Anyway, he left the hotel in Indonesia, and within minutes, one of the first people he passes on the road is wearing Cannibal Corpse shirt. That's how ingrained death metal is to the Indonesian people. I read an article recently when I was researching this video that was trying to trace back where does Indonesia's love of death metal come from. And they found that Indonesia has always loved heavy metal back to the Judas Priest and Iron Maiden days, and even some into Metallica, but it wasn't until Napalm Death and their album Harmony Corruption came out that it was like a breath of fresh air for the people of Indonesia. They just fell in love with this brutal death sound, and they've been running with it ever since. And what I really love about the fact that Napalm Death was the main inspiration is that, in a way, the modern death metal Indonesian scene, or the modern death metal scene in Indonesia, is a lot like Napalm Death the band. Napalm Death is a band which is very diverse in its catalog. You have people who only know Napalm Death as the grindcore band. Then there are people like me who love their brutal death metal. And so you get a lot of both of those influences throughout Indonesia. Anyway, as we close out 2018, we started looking back at the best metal albums of the year. And this brings us to Immense's Slaughter of Brutality. It's on Brutal Mind Records, and the best way to hear it is through the Bandcamp page. And you might want to buckle up because I have a lot to say today about this band and this album. Now, first let me say, I have a lot of respect for people who try to create art in a language that's not native to them. I mean, the complexity of that is amazing. And in heavy metal, you get a lot of that, whether it's Sweden, Norway, Finland, Poland, France. You have bands who decide that English is going to be their metal language, and they go for it, even if it's not their strongest language. And Indonesia, to say the least, some things get lost in translation. Now, the band name Immense is pretty awesome. I'm not going to hold that against them. It's a great name and it works. And if you look at the album art, you know, it's not bad. It's just kind of typical brutal death metal. Everyone's dying and being killed in some way or another. Yeah, typical for the scene. Now, it's with the title Slaughter of Brutality that things start getting a little different. I mean, what's Slaughter of Brutality mean? Are they slaughtering brutality? And can you slaughter brutality? Or is it like slaughter of period brutality? Or, I don't know. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it gets even wilder when we look at some of the song names. So, let's go over a few of these song titles. Slaughter of Brutality, which we've discussed. Flesh Prostitute Organs. Flesh Prostitute Organs. Okay, prostitute organs, we know what those are. Flesh, skin. Skin is an organ, so are they just saying skin? Greedy Bastard Carrion. So greedy bastard, okay, carrion. Carrion is a dead, rotting animal. So greedy bastard, dead, rotting animal, or you're a greedy bastard, hey look, a dead, rotting animal. Alright, here's a good one. Orgasm Cutthroat. Fetus mutilated, internally scars. Okay, we'll give that one a pass. Sodomized Doomsday. That's probably my best. So, are they talking about the Superman character and he was sodomized? Is that what happened? Now, I'm sure that the actual lyrics probably are just as challenged as the song titles. I mean, let's be honest. The song titles, they basically just went on the internet and found one of those death metal name generators and just like chose them. You know? Now, we don't know the lyrics. Well, at least I don't know the lyrics because that brings me to my next point. So, as you know, in the last couple of videos, which is a pretty new channel, but I typically like to have physical media when I'm talking about a band, or at least loosely connected. And it's a little difficult with emits. So, obviously they don't have a vinyl. That's cool. Vinyl is difficult and expensive for some bands, especially, you know, super underground bands. I'm sure even doubly so for a band in Indonesia. They do sell a CD version, but if you go on the Bandcamp, you'll see that you buy the CD, then you must also buy the jewel case that the CD will come in, and they ship those separately. So if you just buy one or the other, you'll just get one or the other. Never seen that done. It's very interesting. Now, to be honest, everything I've talked about, I'm just kind of having some fun here. Admittedly at their expense. But nothing I've really said up until now really matters. Because the music is freaking great. Let's start with the production. It's fantastic. I mean, every instrument can be heard clearly through the mix. Everything seems balanced. It's well produced CD, especially for underground, friggin' brutal death metal. And with the intro track, sometimes for me, intro tracks are kind of hit and miss. This one works great. It starts off with kind of like cheesy horror movie kind of sound effect samples, which are fine. But then the kind of marching guitars come in, and it really builds up into the first real track, and it builds well. And then when the first track comes in, it's just, well, track 2, unbelievable. I mean, you have no idea how good this little band from Indonesia is. I remember watching a documentary about Cannibal Corpse, and they were talking about when Chris Barnes, a major forming member of their band, quit. He's a vocalist. They kind of all got together and decided, okay, well, how hard could it be to write death metal vocals? I mean, you never know what he's saying, right? But what they found is that with death metal vocals, it's more about percussion than anything else. That there's a certain rhythm with good death metal vocals that are really hard to duplicate, and dare I say, there's a catchiness. The best death metal vocals are catchy and are an instrument unto themselves. And you may laugh, but I honestly found myself singing this album because the vocals are so catchy. Obviously, I don't know what they're saying, but it doesn't matter because it fits so well. And something that's really amazing, I'm a guitarist, and so obviously one of the first things I noticed with the guitars and the musicianship is just outstanding. I mean, I just find myself thinking about some of the riffs of this album over and over, and some of the guitar tricks. They're just fun. And honestly, one of the biggest standouts for me in this album is the drums. Because when it comes to technical death metal, brutal death metal especially, drums in the modern era, there tends to be a lot of gimmicks used. Like you'll hear, especially in brutal death metal, they'll mess with the tuning on the snare so it sounds crazy and it's supposed to sound more brutal. But honestly, for me, it just kind of sounds silly. I'm sorry, it just does most of the time. I mean, sometimes it works, but most of the time it just sounds goofy. But on this album, the drums do what they're supposed to do. They add rhythm and tempo to the song, and then the blast beats will just destroy the whole universe. Now, honestly, I could go on all day about this album because I love it. I could go through each song individually, and I still am. It's so complex that I'm still going through this album up until today. But do yourself a favor, check it out as we round out 2018. Happy New Year, everyone, and let's make 2019 the most metal year ever.